Hello and welcome to this edition of the Bravas Podcast. In this edition, we're going to spend some more time talking about light with one of our key lighting partners. I have with me Keith. Hello, Keith. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you, Nigel?
I'm great, thank you. And also with us from Lutron is Cecilia Ramos. I think I got that right. Did I, Cecilia?
You did.
Now, let me get your title right because I'm known to mangle people's titles. But I have it written down here as Senior Director, the Architectural Market. Is that right?
You got that right as well.
Okay, good. So maybe we've talked a bit before, and I know you have a very impressive resume. So why don't you just tell us a bit about your background and how you got where you are?
Sure. So I'm an architect by training, and I studied architecture at MIT and then did my master's at Princeton. And I've always loved art in the built environment. And so that's what brought me into architecture. And ultimately, when I finished my master's at Princeton, I'd done a lot of work with the art history department there. And my first job out of the master's program was working on a museum exhibition with the Princeton University Art Museum called Architecture as Icon. And it explored how architecture and the representation of architecture and art and iconography in the Byzantine times really elevated the art form to a spiritual form. And as many of us know, lighting in the museographic space is very, very important, as is the representation of light in paintings. And so it was from that initial museum exhibition that I worked on that led to other opportunities collaborating with other museums and ultimately brought me into the field of lighting design, where I worked for numerous years with a large global lighting design firm based out of New York City. And in that role, I oversaw luxury retail market and the rollout of brand stores for LVMH Group. So over a period of 5 years, I was probably logging about 200,000 miles a year, traveling around the world and opening stores for Louis Vuitton, Dior, and Dior perfumes, which then ultimately leads me to how I got to Lutron, which was, as you do these stores globally, they need the best in controls, and not only just best in quality, but best in service. And so Lutron was the spec of choice. And I got to know some of the gentlemen from Lutron, and ultimately they brought me on board in 2016 to be part of the company, which is where I'm at now. So it's been an interesting trajectory, but always kind of following my passion of art and ultimately how the built environment is shaped through light and other factors like that.
That's great. So you've obviously got a great experience in light. I wonder whether we should start let's go back 5 years. I think so much has changed. Talk a bit about how you think and how you've seen light change and what people care about in light over the last few years.
Sure. So I think one of the biggest shifts in light over the past 5 or even 10 years is that it's become an amenity rather than just a commodity. And if I'm to expand a little bit on what that means is, I think when light was first introduced into the residential home through dimmers in the 1960s, which is where Lutron really kind of gained its foothold, it was all about creating these ambiances in the built environment, right? So we had this beautiful ad campaign from the 1960s called Dial Up the Romance, where by dimming the light by night, you could warm those incandescents and really create this remarkable space to have a dinner with your partner or your family, which is very different than the space that you might, cook a meal at noon. I think as the lighting industry evolved in the 80s and 90s, it became more about energy savings, and it became more of a commodity that people had in their homes and didn't really pay too much attention to. But over the past 5 years, I think as LEDs have gotten better in quality and there's all these new features that you can introduce, like the changing of color temperature in order to mimic the natural light of the sunlight, for example, all of a sudden it's an amenity that really enhances lives. And people, I think, are beginning to understand that and really want that in their homes. And I think the other thing that's also kind of pivoted and changed is that light has now become much more about the human experience. And so it's not just about illuminating something so that it looks good or having the right amount of light on a surface to complete a task. It's about creating a space that you want to be in, that makes you feel great, that makes you perform at your best, that helps you settle in for a night, whatever it might be. But I think light has this amazing quality to really bring people together when curated correctly. And the human experience, I think, is really pivotal to where light is going now.
Okay, so given that it is the human experience, let's talk about some of the things you think people are getting wrong when they build houses. We have a lot of our customers, a lot of the people we work with as trade partners who work with people who build houses. So if you were building a house, what would you say they should start thinking about if they want to get this human-centric light right?
Right. So I think the one thing that people may get most wrong is simply not to acknowledge or think about the power of light in a space. And so what do I mean by that? I think a lot of us take it for granted what light can do to transform a space. So we know when it feels right, and when it doesn't feel right, we know something is off, but we don't exactly know why, right? And so I think one of the first things is acknowledge the power of light and bring in the right partners to make this, kind of magic happen. And the right partners might be an architect who has a sensibility for light and can help guide you through the processes, a lighting designer, a top-notch integration partner like you guys. I think it requires an acknowledgement of sensibility, and then an openness to exploring, different ways that light can transform space. I'll give you an example. I have the home that I'm sitting in right now that's outside of New York City in the Hudson Valley, and the light here is very warm. It's a darker material color palette. And what feels right in this kind of wooded house is a much more kind of warm light. Whereas in my New York City apartment, because spaces are small, it's all whited out, and I need a much brighter, more ambient light there, right? And so I think you don't always have to have the right prescription of light to apply to all places, but you need to be able to kind of keep your eyes open and begin to look and see what feels right to you. And it's a very personal matter. And I think that the personalization of it, too, is critical. So, again, bring in the right partners that can help you understand light. And then I think a second thing that I could add to that is, come visit a space where you can experience light. And, working with Lutron and Ketra, we have some amazing experience centers throughout the country where you can come, and I joke it's about marinating in light. So when you sit in it and you marinate in it, you look around, you really begin to understand the power it has to both transform the built environment and also kind of influence how you feel. And so I think exposing yourself to those moments is also very important.
Keith, thinking about this from our sort of partners, our designers, builders, architects, what sort of questions do you find they are most asking that you think Cecilia could help us answer?
What questions are they most asking?
About light.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of curiosity about the simple techniques, kind of what you mentioned, simple techniques you can apply to make light more of a part of the architecture of the home. Like behind you, I see you're lighting a vertical surface, not just a horizontal surface. Are there any really small techniques that architects and interior designers could start to apply in jobs where they maybe don't have the budget to bring a lighting designer in?
Yeah. I think first of all, it's choosing a quality light, because not all light renders materials equally. And by quality light, it could be, in technical terms, the color rendering index. How does that white light make the materials appear? But it could also be the color temperature, right? So as we think about sunlight throughout the course of the day, it varies in the color temperature. So by morning, it's very warm. It's a kind of a glow that's golden. By noon, it's crisp and bright white. And by evening, it kind of warms up again. And so if we think about how those different color temperatures of white change throughout the course of the day, and also how they render different materials, a deep red cherry kitchen countertop is going to look generally better under a warmer light because it brings out those reds. Whereas with a cooler light, it would look a little bit more pale. So I think one thing is being conscientious of the quality light and choosing a color temperature or a range of color temperatures that enhances the material palette that you have in place. I can't say enough about controls. I mean, a space with your lights 100% on feels very different than a space where your spotlight over your dining table is at 100%, but your, ambient lighting in the kitchen's at 50%, and your little table lamp to the side is just a warm glow at 20%, right? So by implementing layers of light and the control of the layers, you're able to really build up a scene that has more visual interest. And those, two things that I mentioned, like the quality light and the control of that light, don't need to be complex, right? I think there's a lot of easy to implement systems in terms of the color temperatures. I know the Ketra light that we work with is amazing. You could literally just screw in a bulb into an existing table lamp and already have that functionality. So it doesn't mean you have to tear out ceilings and replace downlights. You can start small and kind of build your way up. And same thing with controls. I think the days of huge panels in the closet with all this, crazy wiring and technology, it's been pared down and simplified, where I think there's different starting points for different consumers. But even for those who are most, let's say, tech averse, there's something for them as well.
If you think, I was going to say, if you think about, sorry, Keith, if you think about what you just described, and then talk a bit about whether if you're refurbishing a house or refurbishing a space, whether there's a different set of decisions to take.
Sure. I mean, I think it all comes, it starts with what are you trying to create and how much money do you have at your disposal to spend? At the most basic level of refurbishing a house, you can really create magic just changing out, the lamps and table lamps and floor lamps. And I think the parallel I would draw to that is if you think of hotels, most hotels typically don't have a lot of pinhole downlights in the ceiling. It's a space where there's a lot of kind of low-level lighting and a lot of decorative lighting. And so they create amazing moods in hotels just through kind of the curation of light in those decorative fixtures. And so for someone who just wants to kind of get started in this world and experience about it, you could just, again, change out those lamps and those decorative fixtures and begin to feel the difference in how the space transforms, both, again, in color temperature, but because these lamps have now gotten smart, they're quote unquote digitally addressable, which means that you can zone them as you wish. So you could have independent control of a table lamp versus a floor lamp, or group them together if you'd like. That's a really easy, simple way to begin to experience different scenarios of light and find what you're most comfortable with. And of course, you can take it to the nth degree with a full tear out and new construction. But I think for those who just want to dip their toes in the water, there's a lot of amazing ways to play with light in that way.
You talked about light being simple to control and simple to use, and obviously that's one of the things Ketra does really well.
Yep.
Can you just talk about real quickly, when we talk about lighting control, a lot of people think we're telling them they have to use an iPad to turn their lights on. They aren't going to have switches. Just talk real quickly about like what that experience could look like if somebody did just swap the lamp, the luminaires in their lamps out in their home, like what that could look like for them in a practical way.
Sure. So in a practical way, I think there's different user interfaces of lighting control, and the user can choose which one they feel most comfortable with. And so if they want to maintain a typical keypad on the wall, where all they do is press a button that says daytime, another one that says evening, and a third one that says nighttime, when they press those buttons, the lights could drop to levels that they've conceived of automatically. And so it's literally as easy as pressing a button to trigger a whole transformation of a scene. For those who, want something on their iPhone or their iPad on the app-based control, and they want to be able to kind of tweak to the finest degrees and play around. If they're throwing a party, turn a space bright pink or bright blue. There's that opportunity as well. So I think to go from like the most basic wall-based control to app-based control or even voice-based control, it can be as simple or as complex as you want. And I would also say that a fourth way to control lights that's probably the the most mindless would be to set, lights on kind of a natural scene. So with Ketra, one of the things that we found our clients wanting is that experience that the daylight's flooding into the home. And so again, you have this kind of melding of exterior daylight plus interior electric light, and they seamlessly come together. And then, of course, through motorized shades, you really take that to the nth degree because you're letting different quantities of natural light in throughout the course of the day. You could have your Ketra bulbs just automatically mimic that curvature of sun throughout the course of the day, so that you get that bright light at noon and that super dim, beautiful, golden candlelight at 9 p.m. And all you have to do is press an on button and an off button. And depending on the time of day, it automatically goes to that preset scene. So lots of different ways to do it. And it's not always one or the other. It could be a combination of 2 or 3 or 4 of those things. But to your point, I think, our customers, one of the top priorities is simple, right? We have enough complexity in our lives. No one wants to be kind of mudding around with something or trying to figure it out on the fly. Or if you have guests over, you want them to be able to use your light, keypads as easily as you do. And so I think, there's a lot of work and smartness that goes into designing a simple, easy system. But the beauty of it is that when it's all dialed in, it's absolute magic.
Exactly. We trust Lutron to take care of the complexity so the clients can just have a simple experience.
Exactly. Just kind of all that's happening under the table and no one needs to see it. For us, a job is well done when no one really notices what we've done behind the scenes. And it's just that moment of, wow, this feels good. That's when we know we've done a good job.
One of the things I hear you guys talking about is how Ketra connects people with light. What does that really mean in terms of if I was about to do a house? What are those critical connections I should be looking for?
Yeah, I think it starts with looking at your lifestyle and what you value and what you prioritize. So, again, light is a super personal thing. And if I were to kind of speak about my experiences, the moments in my day that are really demarcated by light are the ritual of waking up in the morning and getting ready for work, right? So that makeup ritual in the bathroom where you're getting ready and perhaps you want to see yourself in the light that you're going to be seen by others at noon, and then you're having a dinner at night, so you want to make sure that you look good for that evening event. So that I would say that's moment number 1, which is more of a solitary moment, but you're thinking through how you'll interact with people through light throughout the course of the day. I'm going to fast forward through the workday because that's typically insane and out of the home. But if I think about, coming back to the house in the evening, and for me, the dining room table experience is a really important one because it's where, my husband and I oftentimes convene either the 2 of us alone, or we'll invite a pile of friends over on a Saturday night to have, an 8 or 10 person dinner. And if it's my husband and I alone, perhaps the light quality there needs to be really subtle around us, and then just 2 bright spots right on that table, so that you're kind of augmenting the food that you're putting on the table and creating a cocoon of light around you. And then perhaps if I'm hosting a dinner party with 8 or 10 people, I need a little bit more kind of ambient spill light, less contrast, so that we can see each other's faces. And then, that environment, is all about bringing people together. So it's not about necessarily that singular cocoon of light, but it's more of a sweep of light that brings people into the fold together. So, that's one space in 2 different ways for 2 different functions with human interaction. I mean, I could name off a whole permutation of them, right? Even in this open floor plan type home, my dining room table, when I sit down on the couch nearby to have my tea for the night, now needs to go dark, right? And then the lights above the couch and the coffee table need to brighten to create that little moment of light. And then if you take that dinner party over to that, coffee table, sofa area, there's a different degree of intimacy that you want at that point through light. So again, it's a mechanism to bring people together. And I would say it's also a mechanism to signal people where to go and where their eyes should follow in the space, and almost narrate the evening through light, which is a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, it sounds like that capability does actually require more fixtures, or would ideally have more fixtures in place, which again brings back the importance of lighting control. How do you see lighting design and lighting control, and then even fixture selection? How do you see all that tying together as a whole?
I mean, I don't think you can separate them out. I think lighting design is the vision of a space and the purposeful selection and implementation of light sources in order to create that total vision. I think lighting control is the kind of fine-tuning and the setting of scenes in order to realize those visions and make them a reality and create moods. And so if you have an amazing lighting design plan, but a poor lighting control narrative or system, it falls flat, right? So they're two in one, and I don't think you can separate that marriage of the two. They're equally important, and they kind of augment one another.
I want to go forward a bit if we could. Clearly light is moving very fast. The trends are moving very fast. If you look forward a couple of years, 2, 3, whatever the right number of years is, what do you think the most exciting things in light that you're waiting for, that you're getting excited about, that people should think through when they're building or refurbishing a house?
Right. I mean, I think what brought me into the world of Lutron and Ketra was this excitement about where can architecture go as you continue to embed more and more technology in it. And that embedding of technology has to be kind of a seamless thing. The moment you notice it, it's probably not working the way that you want it to. And again, I mentioned this previously, but the whole concept of user interface, right? We don't want things that make us feel like we have to work to get what we need. We want to see seamless. And so, we've gone from crazy control panels to keypads to now the ability to control lights via a phone or a watch or an iPad, into voice control. And all of a sudden it's becoming more and more subtle and more kind of intrinsic to our very being, how technology in the built environment is interacting. So, where is it going to go next? I'm going to leave that as an open question because I think there's a lot of dreamers who are me watching this, but I think that beauty of, kind of the intuitiveness and how it just becomes an absolute seamless mix of the tangible with the built environment and the intangible, which is the kind of the smarts of the building. I think that's the excitement and the beauty and what I look forward to seeing transform.
So, Cecilia, are there any other trends that we should be looking out for in light?
Yeah, so I think one of the major trends that we're seeing in home lighting is I don't want to say appropriation, but the inspiration coming from commercial world. And so if I were to elaborate on that, if you think about, a 5-star hotel room, a lot of those spaces, have these controls where when you swipe your key card, the door opens and drapery track rolls open and your lights slowly turn on to give you a grand welcome scene. And, as you go to sleep and you're in an international hotel room, the keypad by your bedside is marked with these very clear, legible icons that look like, a sunshine, a moonlight, and the shade drapery closing. You know exactly which one to press and it closes. I think trends like that or I would say movements like that in the commercial realm, whether it's specific to hotels, or I could even think like museographic lighting, how amazing light can render paintings and really augment their value with light. I think we're seeing those things pull into the residential world. And so as people travel the world more and get exposed to all these different really sophisticated lighting environments, they want them at home. And, I think that's one of the things that at Lutron we're always looking at because, we're a company that does both commercial and residential. And that kind of cross-pollination of ideas is inspiring and ultimately kind of grows new ideas. And we're seeing the homeowners really want to, take that expression in their homes to the next level. So I think that's one direction. I think the other direction that I'd be remiss not to address is, right now we're spending a lot of time at home, whether we like it or not. And that dining room that I was describing to you as this amazing, convening dining place is now my office, right? So I sit at this table for 10 hours a day, and then I clear it off and then I eat at it. And we're seeing, the home become this multi-use space where people are asking for lighting to be able to help them kind of transition throughout the course of the day from one task to another and from one environment to another. And so as our homes begin to be redefined also as work environments moving forward, the possibilities and the potential of lighting to aid in that and to really augment it, I think is amazing. And not to mention, as we sit in our homes, going back to the idea of natural light, I think sitting near a window, having your electric light meld with that of the outside, it makes you feel like you're outside. I think moments like that become more and more important and more precious as we spend more time at home.
So talk real briefly about the difference between just high quality or high accuracy light and the light right for a space and how Ketra does that.
Sure. So, I think for those who are familiar with lighting and lighting technology, we'll typically look at, a cut sheet of a fixture and say, okay, what's the color temperature? So what kind of white is it? Check. What's the color rendering index? Is it high, which means it renders colors well? Check. And then does it have, the lumen output that I need to illuminate a given surface? Check. But I think the nuances of light are so much greater than that. And one of the things that, Ketra light does beautifully is it expands upon that definition of quality light. And one of the ways that we do so is through looking at something called vibrancy. And so if you take a 3000 Kelvin fixture and illuminate a rose with 0% vibrancy, it's going to render it like natural sunlight, right? So high CRI quality light source. However, if you illuminate that same rose, still 3000 Kelvin, but you go to 100% vibrancy, all of a sudden it looks almost like you've added an Instagram filter. And it's like this kind of beautiful, rich red, which to some people is like the end all be all, and they must have that in their home for illuminating their flowers or their food or their art pieces. Vibrancy is a whole different way of looking at light because it's basically peaking the wavelengths that correspond to the red spectrum. And so it's really shooting more red wavelengths of light at that object to make it appear more red. And in turn, the CRI is lower, but to many people, it actually looks higher quality or more saturated or more beautiful. And so I give this description and story because, again, I think light is a lot about playing and experimenting. And, just selecting a source off a cut sheet isn't sufficient. I think to really understand all of the parameters and possibilities is super important. And then I would also add, another key thing to consider is over time, what's going to happen to that light source. I think we've all been in spaces where 2 years down the line, we have one pink light bulb, one white, one green. They've all discolored. They don't match anymore. It looked fantastic day one, and now it looks absolutely terrible. So, with Ketra, one of our patented features is a color lock, which essentially maintains the color temperature of that fixture within 1 degree Kelvin for the warranty of that lamp. So you'll make sure that you have that kind of equal light throughout the space, no matter if you change a light source out, 3 years down the line or 5 years down the line, and you don't get that kind of weird mosaic of colored light sources, which is an unfortunate thing in our world these days.
Yeah. Well, I know we've got to get you out of here pretty quickly. So we have 3 questions that we ask everyone when we end this podcast. I'd love to ask you those questions real quickly. The Perfect. First one, what pieces of home automation technology could you not live without?
Oh, that's an easy one. So it's my
figured it would be.
It's my app-based control for my lighting and my shades in my house. But the reason why is because I have a parrot, and I oftentimes come home from work really late, and she won't go to sleep until the lights are turned off. And so when I'm at a business dinner and it's 7 p.m., I take out my app and I turn off the lights and hit the shades. I know the bird is going to sleep, and she'll be in a better mood when I wake her up the next morning. So that's my easy one.
Haven't gotten that answer yet. Okay, second, what job or project do you think was the best you ever saw, and why, or the one that stood out to you the most?
So I think on that, I'm going to go one historical and inspirational and one recent. So I think one of the most seminal pieces of architecture and its incorporation of light is Eero Saarinen's chapel on the MIT campus. And so this is a cylindrical brick building that's surrounded by a moat of water. And inside of it, the cylinder basically glows with the ripple effects of the light that's been reflected off the water of the outside and into the space via a little peripheral glass surround. And you have this beautiful skylight that cascades light down. And I still remember my first studio at MIT. Our professor walked us in there and sat us down for 4 hours in silence. He wouldn't let us speak. And we just sat there and watched how the natural light transformed the space. And it was mind-boggling and super memorable. So that stuck with me and where I've gone in my career trajectory since then. In terms of a more recent application of a project that I worked on, we participated in the Kips Bay Show House in New York City over the last year. And in 2019, I mean, it's an amazing show house. They took over an old brownstone and they assigned different rooms to different designers. And we worked with numerous designers on illuminating their spaces with Ketra light. And the entry sequence was designed by Richard Rebel. And it's this beautiful space that has a deep blue carpet that's almost colored like a peacock feather and kind of carves up the stairs of the foyer. And then opposite the stair foyer, there's this beautiful painting of a religious icon in kind of a gold. And we worked with him to illuminate the painting in a much warmer color temperature, because that's what brought forth the colors of that. Whereas the carpet in the foyer wallpaper was this cool blue. And so he decided upon, I think it was a 4,000 Kelvin light for that. And ultimately, it just looked like a magical space. But for those of us who kind of worked behind the scenes and dialed in the Ketra light, there was quite a bit of thought that it went into it to render it as it was.
Sure. Well, and the third question you've more or less answered, but I'd love to just get your to kind of clarify that for us. What technology or gadget in the future are you most looking forward to?
I think it's the seamless melding, even more so than it is today, of environment and these intuitive technology that just works for us and we don't have to work for it. And again, it's gone from button presses to app-based control to voice control, and I'm excited to see where it goes next. The less we have to work to get beautiful spaces, I think the happier we all are. We all love simple, and I think it's going to continue to evolve, learn and simplify as we move forward, and I'm excited about that.
Yeah, so are we. Well, Nigel and I thank you so much for getting on here. Bravas, thanks you. We really do appreciate your time and look forward to continue our relationship with Ketra and Lutron in the future.
Thank you so much, Keith, and my best to you and Nigel, and we'll be in touch.